Would a great innovator give up so easily on that promised future?
I won't. I'll find a way to save us all.
Welcome guys, today was a big day for End of Dragons news. We got a stream showing off some of the new elite specializations. They've been revealing more details about them as the week's gone along. Obviously with the big stream announcing a lot of stuff at first peek at End of Dragons, we got a lot on the Virtuoso already. But both the Harbinger and the Willbender, that's the Necro and the Guardian elite specs, were shown in detail. We get to see all the traits, and there was a Virtuoso section as well. So, in this video, I want to give you guys a snappier rundown of my first impressions. Now, what's also maybe on the cards is, if you guys want to see this, let me know. I'll do a full show run-through where I discuss it with Boots in real time, and you'll probably get a bit of commentary on all the traits and all the little nitty-gritty, if you guys like that idea. I actually missed out on the stream itself today. I was asleep, so I've just got back from rewatching the VOD, and I want to give you guys my general take. Some positive, some not so positive. I'll also point out another thing that's on the cards is they did just do another big balance patch preview. Obviously, balance from now till the launch of the expansion is going to be about prepping things for this new wave, and I could bring Boots on for that one as well. So let's talk a little bit about the show presentation itself. I think it was pretty good. Their idea of breaking the 9 elite specs into 3 sections, so 3 of 3, allows these to be, you know, around that hour to 2 hour length. It's not too overwhelming for people, and you really get to digest and take things in. I still kind of believe, though, that individual streams, like you do a whole stream just on one spec and then another whole stream on another spec, would be nicer. I guess they don't want to commit to doing 9 of those. I mean, the expansion is until like February, right? So I'm sure that they have time for that. And what they could do on the individual streams is actually have those live Q&A sections, which allows the driver to actually demo stuff and sort of do a bit more back and forth. I think that would have worked really well. I did find, even for me, that kind of knows the game very well and already was fully prepped with the information we already know going into this, I was feeling a bit fatigued when we finally got into the last class. There's just so much to run through. But what really worked here, better than I saw them do with POF, and better than I saw them do with Heart of Thorns, is the driver, CMC, who was actually showing this stuff off, really knew what was up. You can instantly tell he was someone who played the game a lot, presumably still plays the game a lot, and understands it. He would talk about attribute combinations, he would talk about coefficients. He got a little bit too numbery and mathsy for my taste, but he was clever. He'd like skip mousing over the first trait, because we all know that the first trait of an elite specialization is basically useless and doesn't need to be looked at. He would instantly refresh the cooldowns of his skills so that he could spam them. He would toggle himself in and out of combat so that he could properly show off the effects of proccing a heal or something. At one point, he even coded a golem to cast a fire grab against him. It was really fun to see. I knew we were in for a treat the second he started the Harbinger demo, which was the first one, and like he initiated an auto attack and immediately stokasted so it wasn't chaining, and therefore he was in combat. If you think back to the way they did it for like Heart of Thorns, dying to Chieftain in the mists, completely unfamiliar with the keybinds and stuff, it was just horrendous. This really worked out. I think the one thing that was missing, though, is there needed to be slower moments on the stream where he zoomed in. He was less of a gamer, basically. He zoomed in the camera a bit, pulled in the FOV a bit, and just showed what the animations look like as you triggered them there in Engine. I think a lot of people really appreciate like that cinematic flavor side of the game, and I doubt they were that satisfied by this one. I get, to a degree, the official trailers they just put up over this week kind of hit that beat, but I think it could have been done a little bit better in the stream itself. It was also kind of awkward having 2 other people on the desk for a really long time that didn't basically have anything to do, and there were awkward moments where you'd hear them talking off screen and realize, oh yeah, some people are just sitting there. And the standard kind of vaguely awkward, cringy feel you get on a lot of these streams, I mean, what can I say? It's the same thing. The relentless water drinking, like, what was up with that? I'm curious to see whether the viewership drops on the next 3 elite specializations and after people have played the beta of these first 3, because I've heard the viewership on this one was actually pretty good, a lot higher than I expected. Didn't they get nearly to 20k at some point? Anyway, enough about the show presentation itself. Let's jump in with the specs, starting in the order that they did it. The Harbinger first. So a quick run through of the new idea with the Harbinger. Shroud is really different here. This Shroud, while you're in it using its skills, Life Force doesn't protect your health. So you are fundamentally way less tanky. You can be counter-pressured much harder. Just that one change, I think people have to think very carefully about, because all of Necromancer in how little mobility it has and active mitigation and stuff throughout the entire class is built around having like some kind of sponge. Even with the Scourge, who doesn't get that sponge so much, they at least get barrier. The Harbinger gets nothing. So I actually think that they're going to be very, very, very squishy. And of the 3 specializations we're looking at here, I think that Harbinger is probably the most underpowered, just from like a fundamental perspective. It's going to need big numbers and like very, very careful tuning to feel really fun to play, because that's like a huge thing for me. The other side of it is that while you're not in Shroud, it's always degenerating. Previously, it was while you were in Shroud, it's degenerating. Here, it's degenerating while you're out of Shroud and giving you health back. So, like, you don't have, like, this big barrier of health, but you can regenerate in a lot of ways. And that might sound like a fitting compensation until you see that another part of the Harbinger is this Blight mechanic. So, Blight is something that you stack on yourself while you are in Shroud. I think you apply it to yourself as you drink the elixirs, which are the utility skill type. And it can stack up to, like, 25 times, I think they say. What it is it's like reverse barrier. It's temporary negative health. Temporary as long as the blight itself is on you. So they kind of have some new UI for that, where barrier would be like an extra number above your number on the health orb. It's now below. So you're going to be really, really vulnerable. I think they say you can get up to 50% less max health. So Necromancer does baseline have a lot of vitality, but even at that, if you're trying to play around with a lot of this blight mechanic and you no longer have this huge sponge in the way of Shroud or Barrier, you're going to be very vulnerable. It's something that needs a dedicated support, which means that it will probably flourish in a lot of these PvE encounters. For competitive modes, I really don't see how much this has. And maybe that's fitting considering the strength of Scourge in a lot of those modes over the past few years. In some ways, you might think of the Reaper as like the really aggressive damage bomb spec, but Reaper actually has a huge amount of quality of life in it. This has even less. By the way, they did say that it's not necessarily a power spec or a condi spec. It's like a hybrid thing. Like pistol can be either if you want it to be, and you can see through the traits and stuff that it can be either. So I'm curious to see how that goes. But yeah, just the baseline mechanics there, I think, put it in a really, really, really like low position. And I actually say that as a positive thing, because as I watch this stream and as I see all the press, I see like a lot of blatant power creep to just try and sell the product, basically. And anywhere that doesn't exist, I actually have a lot of respect for. So we'll see how it goes. Some other takes on it as well. It looks like a very work in progress spec to me. Like almost like a budgetary spec. Like it doesn't have that many amazing big flashy animations. If you think about the elixirs and how subtly you can just sort of quickly drink one of those, you can see they probably saved a lot on the budget on animation work here. Even the Shroud animations, which I complimented on my video earlier in the week where I was looking at the trailer, don't actually feel that special or interesting, especially compared to these other two specs, the Virtuoso and the Willbender. It all feels very basic, and I have to say, are these the finalized icons for the elixirs? Really? It's a pretty superficial thing to criticize, I guess, but wow, they look so out of place to me. I guess at least all the flasks look interesting and distinct. It makes me wonder if we'll get a cool collection or opportunity to run around in Cantha and actually speak to Harbingers who will talk about what concoctions are actually in each vial or flask as we collect them or something and unlock the build. But yeah, it did strike me. Pistol, likewise, feels very simple. I mean, it was always going to be to a certain degree, I think. I am amazed at the power behind the skill 3. On my previous video, I did say, wow, did we see a stun on pistol? Remember, it's main hand pistol. So what we're getting is the first 3 skills, which kind of have to have low cooldowns. And because they kind of have to have low cooldowns for the flow of the weapon skill execution stuff to feel good, they kind of can't be that powerful. And yet the skill 3 and pistol, guys, I mean, talk about strong. It's an AoE stun on a 16-second cooldown with poison and weakness on it. I think there was weakness there. Absolutely crazy. And if it wasn't for some of the stuff I saw on Willbender, I would say, you know, one of the most overpowered things that we saw on this stream. Another super strong thing that I like the look of is the Elite Elixir, which is basically like a classic Lissa rune proc on you. It gives you all the boons in the game. We haven't really seen these interactions for a while, and there's a trait that lets you share them with everyone around you. So I think that's going to be really fun. You know, I feel like the Reaper Elite was brilliant and fun to use and is often one of my favorites. I feel like Ghastly Breach is often one of my favorites. And now, even with the Harbinger, I think the Necro Elite specs, Elite skills, have always been really good. It does feel a bit mismatched to have something so, like, support-oriented, on something that fundamentally feels like it's meant to be a nuka kind of experience that needs support. Somehow I get the feeling with a lot of these elite specs that they're not very synergistic. I'll talk more about that in a second. So let's jump on into the Virtuoso, which I really don't have very much to say. One thing that they did clarify, and I think is pretty interesting, is you do persist, I don't know if this has been revealed somewhere already, but you do persist with the blades out of combat. So remember, as you now generate clones, which usually need a target or an enemy, and if you're not in combat, you don't have one, the clone will go away. Instead, you get blades, and you can stockpile them away from the fight now. So pretty much you're going to begin every battle, I guess, with 5 blades. You know, you'll prep them somehow, and then that means that you can go in with a very big shatter. For the competitive settings, I think that'll be quite interesting to see how front-loaded they are. And just seeing how certain core mesmer mechanics change based on this behavior, like running a Signet of Illusions will constantly be prepping them as you wander around in World vs. World or whatever. Over for the traits, which was most of the new information, they felt very simple, very low to the ground. I actually really like a lot of what they're doing with the traits of these elite specs. One that was particularly interesting is permanent uptime on self-quickness whenever you block or dodge. And there's also like Aegis spam on this spec. So I was a little bit worried about whether I would find a great open world build for this or even its competitive prospects. But a trait like this, lots of block spam, lots of self-quickness. I actually think this will be a really fun one to run around in Cantha itself for. But the rest of the traits really weren't too interesting, especially like at the Grandmaster tier. I'm always looking for like big build-defining, animation-changing stuff at Grandmasters. And I feel like I didn't really get anything to chew on for the Virtuoso. Probably my favorite trait is something that people had actually managed to analyze before this stream even came out. If you watch the previous footage very closely, they do have a trait which is your phantasms fire a blade right as they're about to despawn. Now that's really interesting. I feel like that could be at the GM tier, and you make it feel a little bit more potent, a little bit more build defining. That's probably the coolest kind of trait to me, the ones that actually affect the execution of skills and the way things look and where the damage packets come from and so on. So that's probably my favorite trait. Overall, I think the Virtuoso section reveals another kind of weakness with the presentation they did. And that's that I'm most curious when it comes to this, seeing the interactions with the core Mesmer stuff. Like Shatterstorm and like heal when I throw blades out and stuff like that. That's what I really want to have a look at. And, all credit to CMC, he did this great thing where he made sure all of the traits were turned off, so we got to look at the baseline effects before then putting them on. There were all these things here, but that also meant we saw no core interactions whatsoever. And again, that's why I sort of think one stream per elite spec would let us dig in a whole lot more. But there you have it. And finally, we have the Willbender. Oh boy, the Willbender. So I kind of threw out some first impressions very recently, based purely on the trailer, and you guys had immediately noticed something that I hadn't. And I think there was actually a massively OP article that talked about this as well, which is this idea that the virtues were the animations we're seeing. And that's exactly what's happening. You get 3 mobility skills on the virtues. There's no longer like a constant passive, but there's like a mini passive after you activate them, and they're all different flavors of mobility. Like the F3 is a really long range shadow step. The F1 is like the rush and the uppercut. The F2 has got a little bit of an evade on it. Not only that, Sword Offhand has mobility. Not only that, the physical utility skills have mobility. So there's just insane mobility on this thing. It's kind of ridiculous. Don't forget, you are on a Guardian who can already use Sword 2 and can already use Merciful Intervention or Judge's Intervention, can already kind of fly around. So, unbelievably fast. Now, that alone I don't necessarily have a problem with. What I am a little bit worried about with this, though, is despite all of the mobility, and ArenaNet do not have a good track record for balancing around mobility, despite all of that, they have a lot of resustain and a lot of brawlery stuff. In fact, they even specifically say in the stream we have brawlery stuff. They have after you shadow step in, gain immunity to weakness and immobilization and cripple and blind. And they have condition shrugging, and they, like I said, they have a lot of actual health resustain, even if they're a little bit squishy. It feels like they are in this perfect center of a ton of different things. And I think that kind of comes from this loose theme that they've gone with. It's called the Willbender. They gave us a little bit of lore about who the Willbenders are, defenders of the Wano Su, and that's an interesting story idea. But then, in the class itself, they're constantly talking about it like it's an assassin. And then they've thrown monk stuff on there. Like, the heal skill is a mini full counter. It's Reversal of Fortune, which is a brilliant idea. We've actually speculated and talked about this a lot before. I love that Reversal of Fortune came in there. So they've gone with monk-like martial art physical utility skills with Reversal of Fortune. So they're kind of doing a monk, but they don't have the confidence to call it a monk. And then they add a ton of, like, mobility stuff, and they refer to it as an assassin the whole way through. So what does that mean? Does that mean we're not going to get a real assassin elite specialization, which would have been a big crowd pleaser? Does that mean we're not going to get an actual monk elite specialization, which would have been a good crowd pleaser, even if fundamentally the concept of a monk is already in the game and is filtered around? A lot of people would ask for monk are asking for healers. It still would have been a good idea. Basically, they took up a bunch of really solid ideas, didn't execute all of them to their fullest, and threw them in on the Willbender that looked completely busted OP. So, I mean, my mouth was just open, kind of half in amazement and half in horror as I was watching this section, if I have to be honest. And just to justify my brawler comments, by the way, they themselves referred to it as a brawler at one point. It's been called both an assassin and a brawler at the same time. They put a trait on it, which means it's invulnerable to damage. It cannot die as long as it's proccing through its F3 courage, which is a really cool idea for a GM. Don't get me wrong, that's the exact kind of transformative, amazing thing that leaves you gobsmacked. That's what I like to see in GMs. But is the Willbender the place to put it? I can already see it now in the competitive environments. A Willbender comes jumping in, you counter pressure, so he goes invulnerable and keeps hitting you. You survive and counter pressure further, so he uses the 3F skills to escape. You catch up and finally think you're going to kill him, but oh no, it's renewed focus. He's invulnerable, and now he has his F skills back, and he's going to jump away again, and on and on and on. I also saw some people in the VOD Twitch chat complaining that, you know, they did a balance patch recently with, like, Ellie, where they made Obsidian Flesh a channel so you wouldn't get passive invulns. And now they add this pack. So it's just crazy. Speaking about general open world PvE, I think this guy's going to be really fun. I love those kind of high mobility specs, as long as they actually have the pressure to jump from target to target at a relatively quick pace. So I am looking forward to that. And to cap it off, this guy can maintain alacrity on top of himself, which means all of these cooldowns are going to come up a lot faster. And by the way, they have very low cooldowns baseline. This, to me, definitely feels like beta balance. It's there to look really OP and really fun and really flavorful, and I don't expect this to last, hopefully, that long after End of Dragons itself comes out. I do also think, because this is kind of like the center of a storm of a lot of ideas, none of them are particularly, like, going to be great in hardcore strike missions as they go forward. If it becomes a big focus on that as endgame, I feel like this guy's going to be amazing everywhere except there, where you'll probably still want to play, you know, Firebrand if you want to go Condi, or you want to go a little bit more hybrid supporty, or Dragon Hunter if you want to burst out with some power damage. I don't see it as too much there, but everywhere else, it's just completely crazy. So there you have it. Those are the 3 specializations. Let's do a general review, and I want to go back to this idea I was talking about a second ago, with how synergistic, how cohesive a lot of these concepts feel, because I do think there's something going on here, and in particular, you guys in the comments have been noting it as well. For example, Spellblade here says, my only criticism of this line of elite specs so far are the names. This was before the stream, for what it's worth. Virtuoso feels so ill-fitting of a spec centered around psionic weaponry and blade dancing. Harbinger feels completely nondescript of the Necro spec, without any lore anyway, and the Willbender sounds so clumsy. Nowadays, Dragon Hunter sounds eloquent in comparison. Well, I don't know if I'd go that far as to make the Dragon Hunter comparison, though I do think a lot of us have acclimated at this point. Core, you guys remember the uproar about that one? But I do think there's something here. Like, when I look at these specs, are they as, like, cohesive as specs we've had in the past? Like, let's look at the first one they revealed, the Chronomancer. During Heart of Thorns, a crunched, rushed expansion. The Chronomancer is a time mage that had an iconic clock-looking shield, clock-based animations with its wells, and several time-themed mechanics too. Quickness, and the newly implemented alacrity, and the rewinder mechanic on its F5. That was a spec that felt cohesive, and I feel like a lot of the Heart of Thorns and POF ones did too, even if they weren't tethered in something pre-existing. Like, look at, like, say, the Hollowsmith. Hollowsmith was something totally new that they made up about this, like, light condensing technology and so on, but they made a really cohesive class where the utilities feel like they match, and the you know, the heal skill isn't something a lot of people use, but you look at what's actually going on with the interplay of the theme and all of the abilities and the traits. It was really tight. Hollowsmith's actually kind of maybe a bad example because it's my favorite elite specialization they've ever made in terms of how everything comes together. But now I look at these three, and yeah, that idea that Harbinger is nondescript. Harbinger means what? That I'm using a pistol and elixirs, and the Virtuoso is a blade dancer, and the Willbender is an assassin brawling monk. The Willbender in particular taking on all of these themes at once and not necessarily executing any of them as its core idea really has me on edge a little bit, I have to say. Besides that, there are a lot of things I like here. I like that they're doing a lot more with trade-offs. You know, a lot of the traits have a built-in idea. Okay, you are squishier if you are running this. You are losing something if you are picking this up. A lot of the traits are very simple, clear ideas. They're not like 3 trait procs in one. It is a trait doing a thing, and it does it well. You know, we have had real problems with Guild Wars 2 with that before, and I see none of those problems being embodied here. They're doing really well with that. All the names of all the traits are simple and easy to understand. I think all of that works perfectly. The way that the traits are lined out are pretty much perfect as well. They'll do like a Condi line, they'll do like a flat damage line, and they'll do like a QOL line. And I can imagine mixing and matching the lines. I can imagine going all deep into one of them based on what kind of build I want to go for. That all works. I just wish there was a little bit more animation tweaking and like extra procs and stuff that were going on. And another thing that I love as well that they're doing, again on the trait side, is there's a lot of conversion traits going on. Have you guys noticed this? I think conversion traits are some of the smartest things Guild Wars can do to incentivize interesting attribute combinations, to push people into weirder stat sets because they'll get so many more stats via conversion traits is actually a really genius idea. Like, if I want to be a Plague Doctor Harbinger because there's just so much synergy coming out of a conversion trait that I can pick up, that's really fun. And so I actually see kind of big numbers on all of those conversions, bigger than we've seen in the past before. I don't actually think that should just be a beta balance thing. I think they should embrace that and even go as hard as possible into that, just so that we've got an interesting mix and match of different stuff people are going for, because that paves over some of the cracks in the design elsewhere in the game, and it'll be really fun for build crafters, fun for people who've maxed out their legendary armories and all of that stuff. So I really liked what I saw with those two. So yeah, just some first impressions on the 3 specs. That's what they revealed with the stream. In the description, I'll put a link to the full VOD if that's what you guys would like to watch. But yeah, check out my channel. I might do like just a casual commentary with Boots as we just watch it through. It'd end up like a 2-hour video if you guys want to see that, and I'll run in with a regular balance for you too. So let me know what you think. Am I a little bit doom and gloomy about the Willbender here? What were some of your takes? Anything really interesting that maybe I missed out on? And I'll be back with more End of Dragons Daily tomorrow. Thanks again for watching, guys. I know I kind of say that at the end of every video, but I really mean it. It's so cool to be able to cover an expansion with good, meaty expansion news, put out a video and have like really awesome comments and feedback and discussion down below. So please, I'd love to see you guys down there. I'm reading them all as always. Your support and the fact you're watching the videos means the world, and I will see you. Take care very, very soon. Probably on the next End of Dragons Daily tomorrow.